Okay, we're going to start looking at the last of the economic objectives, which is a fair and equal distribution of income. To start off, we're going to look at perfectly equal income distribution. I, for one, don't know that really means that it's fair, obviously. I think some people deserve more money, more compensation than others. So just keep that in mind. We're not talking about going communist here or anything. We're just trying to establish a baseline. So here we have 5 different people. So each one of them represents 20% of the population. Well, perfectly fair would mean that each of them controls 20% of the income, which is shown down here in the pie. So 20%, this guy, 20% controls 20%, this 20% of the income. And so does that person, so the two of them together, 40%, control 40% of the population, or individually 20 and 20. Obviously we keep going, woo! That was just for a little fun. And this would be what a perfectly balanced or perfectly equal income distribution would look like. Each 20% of the population controls 20% of the income. Now in economics, what we look at is we look at quintiles. So a quintile is 1/5 of the population. So again, what we would show here is that the least wealthy quintile, so the poorest 20%, would control, say, 20,000 pounds. Okay? Well, that happens to be the exact same as the wealthiest 20%, and in this case, there is no differentiation really. So, least wealthy or wealthiest, well, really they're all the same because we showed them being perfectly equal. There's a graph we use in economics to represent this information, and that's called the Lorenz curve, named after the economist who, I guess, came up with the ideas. And what we show here is we show income on the y-axis, and then we show quintiles along the x-axis. And it's real simple. We go, okay, well, the least wealthy, they make $20,000, 20,000 pounds, excuse me. Okay, so the lowest 20% makes 20,000 pounds there. The next lowest also makes 20%, so we add them, and that's a big mistake people make. Notice this is up here. It's not at 20,000 because now we're looking at the lowest 20% added to the next lowest 20%. So we end up with 40% controlling 40,000. So again, 20 and 20 is 40, controlling 20 and 20, 40,000. So in that same way, we go to 60, 80, and 100, and then we draw a line that connects them all. All right? Now we call this line, it's the line of perfect equality. And again, this represents if everyone in the country had the exact same amount of income. Okay? All right, well now let's look at the exact opposite of that. So again, we see that each one of these is 20% of the population, but the least wealthy, they don't get any of the income. They're left out. Second least wealthy, same thing. They're left out. Third and the fourth, same thing. And the fifth controls all of the money. That's why I showed them awfully big here. Okay, now again, no one is suggesting this exists anywhere in the world. It's just establishing the other baseline. So instead of it being perfectly equal, it's perfectly unequal. Unequal, I guess, is probably the right word there. So one person controls all of the wealth. Now how we would show this is, again, we would go back to the Lorenz curve, but it's not going to be the line of perfect equality anymore. Now we say the least wealthy controls $0. So we got a little dot there. The 40% least wealthy, so the 20 plus the 40, they also control $0. Same with 60 and 80, and then all of the money is controlled by the 100th person, okay, the 100% or percentile, so that's up here. So the line that we draw here is going to look like that, and it's called the line of perfect inequality. Okay, so those are our two extremes. So this would be a country that was perfectly equal. This would be a country that was perfectly unequal. Okay, maybe some more realistic examples. So once we have this established, we can go, okay, well, a country like Sweden, they've got about the best in the world. And what we can see is that 20% of their people maybe control 5% of the wealth. Okay, and 40% of their people maybe control up to 15% of the wealth, and then we see it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. So if you think about the two lines, we've got the line of perfect equality and line of perfect inequality. They're pretty close to the line of perfect equality. So they're doing pretty well. They're pretty equal. A country like Italy, actually still quite good. I think they're top 15 in the world in this category. But you do see they're not as good as Sweden. So if we looked at the same, first quintile here, we would see that they control a smaller amount of the wealth than the first quintile of Swedish people do. And the 60th quintile, they control a smaller amount of the wealth than the 60th percentile in Sweden does. So again, since Italy is closer to the line of perfect inequality, we can say that they're not as equal as Sweden is. From this, we come up with a number called the Gini index. And this is just simple math. You're not expected to do the calculations. You just kind of need to know how the calculations are done and what they represent. So let's look at Italy. Okay, so we're looking at a ratio of the area inside of the curve to the area of the whole triangle. So for Italy, we're saying this whole area, so the black and white for Italy, in addition to Sweden, because we see that Italy contains Sweden's. So from this curve all the way up to the line of perfect equality, that's going to be the first number that we look at. We usually just call that A. Okay. Second number then is the area of the whole triangle down here. Okay. So that whole triangle is the second. So it's just a ratio of everything inside of the curve to everything to the whole area. So obviously, the bigger this curve is going to be, the bigger the number is going to be. So Italy's area, the area of Italy's curve, is greater than the area of Sweden's curve. So it's a bigger number divided by the same number, because either way the triangle is the same, compared to a smaller number, Sweden's, divided by the same number. So we can expect that Italy's Gini index, or sometimes you hear this called the Gini coefficient, we could expect that Italy's is going to be bigger. In fact, it is. Italy's number is 31.9. Again, that's still pretty good. And Sweden's is 23. Sweden is tops in the world, although their numbers are a little bit old. Second worst in the world, I guess I took that off of my PowerPoint. Second worst in the world is where we live. So that's not real good. Okay? And this is the whole world, and this is just showing, different colors. So we see that green is good. It does show Greenland up here as better than Sweden, so that's either a more recent statistic or because Greenland's not its own country, maybe it doesn't get factored in. Anyway, so green is good, and getting darker and darker red is less equal. Maybe I shouldn't say good, because that's me putting a judgment call on it. Green is more equal, red is less equal. So we see that the worst countries in the world are the really, really dark maroon. And actually, this doesn't show South Africa as the second worst anymore either. So again, you always have to be careful with statistics. Who knows which one's most current? Anyway, so that's equality, and we'll talk more about it in class.